Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome everybody to the special meeting of the Sonoma Valley Citizens Advisory Commission, along with the Springs Municipal Advisory Council, the North Sonoma Valley Municipal Advisory Council. We are having a meeting tonight about the Sonoma County housing element, and I will, at this point, call the meeting to order and ask everybody to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the
republic
for which it stands, one
nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. At this point, I would like to turn to our Spanish interpreter to make an announcement.
Sí, buenas noches, gracias a todos por estar aquí. Si quieren recibir la interpretación en español, por favor, hágale clic abajo en la barra, cuando salga el menú, escoja el globito que sale allí y cuando le haga clic al globo le va a dar la opción de español o inglés. Escoja la opción de Spanish en español y yo voy a estar ahí en un canal donde voy a estar interpretando la junta simultáneamente. Gracias.
Gracias. And just as a word to the public, we will be making announcements throughout the meetings of how people can access the Spanish language interpretation. At this point, I would like to ask us to turn to item number 2 on our agenda, which is, oh no, before we do that, we'll take a roll call. Excuse me, starting with the Sonoma Valley Citizens, excuse me, the Springs MAC roll call.
Okay, Councilmember Lombard.
Present.
Councilmember Reyes. Councilmember Alcaraz, I know is not here. Councilmember Winders.
Present.
Councilmember Hardiman.
Present.
Councilmember Perrott, I'm here. And Chair Aturi.
Here, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Perrott. I would now turn to the North Sonoma Valley MAC Vice Chair Arthur Dawson to call the roll for the North Sonoma Valley MAC.
Thank you, Chair Freeman. North Sonoma Valley Chair Kate Eagles.
Here.
Councilmember Handren.
Here.
Councilmember Cooper. Looks like Cooper is not here. Councilmember Newhouser. Is he here? I thought Mark was here, but
he just weighed in, Arthur.
Oh, he did. Okay. Councilmember Dickey, who I believe was not planning to attend. Councilmember Morgan.
Here.
And Councilmember Oldroyd. Okay, I think that does it for the North Sonoma Valley Advisory Council.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dawson. Now I'd like to turn to Secretary Spalding for the roll call on the Sonoma Valley Citizens Advisory Commission.
Thank you. Chairman Freeman.
Here.
Secretary Spalding, I'm here. Vice Key is excused. Commissioner Vella. I think that was a here. Commissioner Polverenti.
Here.
Commissioner Rouse, I believe, is excused tonight. Commissioner Dombach.
Here.
Commissioner Ituri is here and wearing both hats. Commissioner Kokanen, I think, is excused tonight. And Commissioner Hermosillo, welcome back.
Here, thank you. Good to be back.
Commissioner Chrysler.
Here.
Commissioner Truesdale. Commissioner Truesdale. Commissioner Brown.
Here. Yes. Here.
Commissioner Felder, I believe, is excused tonight. Commissioner Lowe. Commissioner Lowe. Commissioner Bramford,
Here.
and ex officio Commissioner Cornwall herself, and ex officio Commissioner Carr is here. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Spalding.
I'm
Yeah, I'd like
also
to
here, Robert Felder from City of Sonoma.
Did I leave you off again, Mr. Felder? My humble apologies.
And this is my last time too.
You know, that's what I was thinking, that you wouldn't leave. My fault. Glad you're here. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay.
Thanks for speaking up. So now I would like to turn to item number 2 on our agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from our October 26, 2022 meeting. I would ask the Sonoma Valley Citizen Advisory Commissioners to raise their hands or speak up if they have any edits to those minutes at this point. If not, I would ask for a motion to approve those minutes.
I move to approve the minutes.
I second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay, or give me the thumbs down. Seeing none, the minutes shall pass as presented. I would like to, at this point, turn to item number 3 on the agenda, which is public comment, which is limited to matters not appearing on tonight's agenda. Would ask anybody in the public to actually raise their hand if they have a topic they would like to broach that's not on tonight's agenda, and we would limit those comments to 2 minutes.
And Chair Freeman, I do see a few hands, so let me get my timer all ready.
Very good, thank you.
And first we have Kim. Kim, you should be able to unmute.
Hi, I didn't mean to raise my hand, but I do have something to say. I'm here with the Sonoma Valley Housing Collaborative, and I would like to discuss affordable housing. I'm here representing other people who are potential first-time house buyers. And I would like you to consider taxing vacant housing and second homes to help pay for affordable houses and reduce vacation rentals in Sonoma. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kim. We appreciate the comments.
Okay, next we have Mary, and I just want to remind folks this is matters not on the agenda, so we do have the housing element presentation coming up. So this is for items that are not related to that presentation. Mary, you should be able to unmute.
Great, thank you. It's Mary Sampson, Boys Hot Springs. I'm calling in regarding the Springs Plaza project. We have formed a group called Wake Up Sonoma, and I am part of that group. We are opposing the plan for the following reasons. 1, there has been limited transparency about the actual Springs project. The public has incomplete information. 2, questions were not answered and many not addressed in the so-called community meetings about the Plaza project held November 15th and 17th, which were paid for and orchestrated by Matson. The plan includes major construction that hasn't been properly vetted to be feasible with that land, including a major underground parking structure. There are much needed repairs to already existing areas of the Springs community that need to be funded first, like Larson Park. The idea that this is a plaza for the community is a wolf in sheep's clothing. It is another investment asset for Matson's. Matson's inability to complete on preceding properties they've purchased, buildings that have been abandoned or sitting still, do not reflect progress or help our community in any way. The Matsons are unreliable partners for our community to engage with in negotiations. They have declined to reveal any plans for their properties, and when they are asked, their answers are evasive. Last but not least, they are anti-LGBTQ, which is an offense to our community. There's been no evidence that their involvement aligns with the community needs in the proposed Springs plan. Thank you.
Good comments, Mary. Appreciate that.
Okay, next we have Josette, followed by Bean, and then Hunter. Josette, you should be able to unmute.
Hi, I'm Josette Brozeiker, Boys Hot Springs. I would like to address the commissioners and council members to ask that another joint meeting be held very soon with the subject of the Springs Plaza project as an agenda item. At this point, the community is going to be given 2 more meetings that I feel are not the correct format to understand what the Springs community wants or needs. The first meeting was structured in such a way as to allow very little community input or opinions to be voiced. Meetings should be open, available on Zoom, and not have rules as to what community members can say. And private for-profit interests should not be paying for or structuring these meetings. The simple fact that the county held meetings behind closed doors with a private for-profit entity, such as the Mansion, should actually never have happened. But now that it has, the county needs to go back to the drawing board to the Springs Plaza idea and engage in real dialogue with the Springs community. If we are truly on such a short time frame to decide on this idea or project, then the county needs to act now and set up meetings with the community. I think many of us truly want a plaza or community center for the Springs. We have an underutilized park, Larson Park. Common sense says this can be improved and developed for community youth. A youth center, community center could easily be placed here. There is lots of outdoor space for community events and celebrations. Why the county is not focusing on this large, accessible open space? Why are they insistent on partnering with for-profit entity with a tiny, almost useless plaza with a parking structure that will mostly benefit commercial interests in the area around it? Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for your comments, Josette. Appreciate that.
Sorry about that. Next up, we have Bean. Bean, you should be able to unmute.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the SDC. As many of you know, the state is planning to sell the SDC and the property. If they do, that land is going to be lost forever. The state accepted 3 bids from private developers, and 1 was a proposal submitted by the Glen Ellen Historical Society. This proposal will, 1, save SDC as public land in perpetuity. 2, will give the local community a strong say in all future decisions. And 3, it will build the most affordable housing. In fact, it will build truly affordable housing for essential workers like teachers, nurses, firefighters, police, etc. We'll present the proposal called The Next 100 Years at SDC at a public meeting next Thursday, December 8th at 6 p.m. at the Hannah Boys Center. I encourage you to attend and learn about the proposal and see how you can help. Again, this public meeting will be on Thursday, December 8th at 6 p.m. at the Hannah Boys Center. Thanks very much.
Thank you for your comments, Bean, and for the work that you're doing.
Okay, next we have Hunter, followed by Dan, and then I don't see any additional hands. So if anyone else would like to make comment, please raise your hand. Hunter, you should be able to unmute.
Hi, my name's Hunter Mills. I'd like to make a comment about the Springs Plaza. I went to the meetings at the Flowery School. I found them to be controlled and manipulative. I found Mr. Mattson to be untransparent about his plans for his own properties that he owns around the plaza. I would like to see the plaza plan nixed and would like to focus on Larson Park as another place for a plaza. The plaza being proposed is unsafe. Kids would not be able to play in that plaza. It's right next to a major thoroughfare. There's no parking. it seems they want to build the plaza just to support the businesses of the Matsons. He owns 2 properties currently within a block of where the proposed plaza would be, and he's in talks to buy more property next to the plaza. So I really think this should be more of a community decision-making process, and it feels like it's all been in Mr. Matson's hands. So I'd like this committee to please visit this and to prevent this plaza plan from moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Hunter. Appreciate the comments.
Okay, now we have Dan followed by Annie. Dan, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Dan Levitas. I lived for a few years on Calle del Monte across the street from a Matson's owned property, and I wanted to comment on how they manage their properties. That I lived across from the Boys Food Center property and the cottages behind it, many of which are occupied by friends of mine. And the Matsons, as far as I could tell, invested nothing in the upkeep or maintenance of that property. The building still has graffiti on it that was that appeared there. I think it's 2 years ago now. There is a fence that keeps falling down that's made out of closet doors that somebody screwed together. I have known the residents to need to repair their own roofs, to repair the parking lot by themselves, to make other repairs that are clearly the responsibility of the landowners, for the simple reason that the landowners do not maintain their property. And as a result of seeing how the Matsons treat their tenants and how they treat their property, in addition to all of the other public information, sorry, I have children here, I would very much urge the community not to trust them to actually do anything that they say that they are going to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the comments, Dan. Appreciate that.
Okay, and now we have Annie, and again, this is the last hand I see. So if anyone else would like to make comment, please raise your hand. Annie, you should be able to unmute.
Hi, I'm Annie Philandis. I have the nonprofit Homeless Action Sonoma. We're building the homeless village next door to Baker and Cook in the Springs. We have a problem right now in that the weather is getting really horrible and we have no winter shelter. The county is not providing any winter shelter. The city is not providing any winter shelter. We are desperately looking for a place to house the homeless, or at least get them warm. And it's been a real problem. We've actually asked Matson if we could use one of his buildings, and he has said no, but so has everybody else, the veterans, the community center, the churches. So it's a real problem. People are freezing to death. And if anyone has any ideas of what we can do about housing the homeless, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Annie, for your comments and your continued support. Seeing no other hands, counting back from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. The public comment portion of the meeting is now closed. We'll now move to item number, I guess it's 4 on the agenda, excuse me, item number 3 on the agenda, which is the cycle housing element, 6th cycle housing element of the Sonoma County General Plan. It will be presented by the Permit Sonoma staff. We will be receiving this. The documents are available to view and download. Let me read a brief description of the project. A housing element is a plan for housing that is completed on an 8-year cycle. All cities and counties in California must prepare and adopt housing elements. The housing element is one of the 7 mandated elements of the general plan and must be updated on a schedule that is set by state law. Sonoma County's 6th-cycle housing element update is due on January 31st, 2023. Apologize for saying 8th earlier. The County of Sonoma is updating its element as required by state law for the 6th cycle. The update provides an analysis of the county's housing needs for all income levels and generates strategies to respond to those needs and to provide enough homes for current and future community members. The draft 6th cycle housing element was released for public review on November 3rd, 2022. Permit Sonoma will present a virtual workshop to present the draft, answer questions, and request that commissioners, council members, and the public provide written comments on the draft. Public comments must be received by 11:59 p.m. on December 4th, 2022. Comments are accepted via email to permitsonoma-housing@sonoma-county.org or by regular mail to Permit Sonoma, attention Eric Gage, G-A-G-E, at 2550 Ventura Avenue, Santa Rosa, California, 95403. At this point, I would like to ask our interpreter to make a announcement for how to access translation before that item is actually presented.
And Chair Freeman, I think we're going to have SVCAC Chair Aturi make that announcement.
Okay, great. Sorry for that. Thank you.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Si hay alguien que necesita interpretación en español, por favor, hagan un clic en el globo a pie de la pantalla donde dice interpretación y escoge español, por favor. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias. Now turning to our presenters. In this item, our presenters will be Eric Gage, Ross Markey, and Bradley Dunn, along with, I apologize, there's a 4th party who will be joining us as well.
That would be Jane Riley, and I believe they're all here. So, and I made Bradley Dunn and Eric Gage co-hosts so that they can share their screens. Let me know if if someone else is going to be sharing screen.
Great, thank you. Shall I proceed?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. So hopefully you can see my slides on your screen. And I'll go ahead and get started. As was mentioned already, this is a housing element workshop for the 6th update. I'm Eric Gage, project manager. With me are Bradley Dunn, who coordinated outreach on the project, Ross Markey, supervising planner, and Jane Riley is our policy consultant. So tonight our workshop is going to focus on the draft housing element, the document itself. I won't be able to address questions about site-specific environmental impacts or environmental impacts in general. The draft environmental impact report has not yet been published, but following publication of the draft EIR in December, there's going to be a separate EIR workshop at Planning Commission. So for tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the schedule. Bradley will present the public outreach to date. We'll review some basics on the regional housing needs allocation and the housing element requirements by state law, as well as the goals and programs, and then receive comments from Commission and the public. So firstly, for those unfamiliar, what the housing element is, it's the primary policy document guiding the production and preservation of housing for the unincorporated county. It is somewhat separate from the general plan. It is a component of the general plan, but it is updated on a separate 8-year cycle with the general plan. Sorry, can you still hear me? It looks like I had a.
I can at the
microphone.
moment. However, you did cut out there for a brief
Okay.
period of time.
Okay, I'll continue.
You're still not coming through.
Oh, geez. Check, check, check.
Can hear you now.
All right, let's see how long this lasts.
Okay.
All right. The housing element is a component of the general plan. It has a 8-year update cycle that must be reviewed and certified by the State Department of Housing and Community Development. And it does contain, as I mentioned, additional requirements and deadlines that are distinct from the other elements of the general plan. So going a little further back for background, the rezoning sites for housing project began in 2018, and it was a process of nominating sites for housing. County staff evaluate candidate sites based on their location, proximity to job services, and other factors identified by the state. Due to the timing, that project was incorporated in the housing element update. A draft EIR was published for the rezoning sites for housing project in 2021, and be assured that if you have provided written comment for that draft environmental impact report, it was considered during the preparation of the housing element draft EIR. So a little bit about the milestones going back from December 2021. We kicked off the housing element update outreach, the data collection and analysis that was to form the technical background, demographics, et cetera. Through summer, we did a number of surveys, which Bradley will discuss in further detail. Public policy development, draft preparation through the summer and fall of this year. Publication of the draft in in November, and revisions to be made from the 30-day public comments that we receive, followed by adoption in early 2023. So we're in the public comment period now. The draft housing element was published on November 3rd. The comment period is through December 5th. We appreciate written comments for ease of documentation and for submittal to HCD. I'll also direct your attention to the implementation programs in the Housing Action Plan and the Assessment of Fair Housing, which is a new section that was required by the state, which is contained in the technical background. And those written comments can be sent to the the email address on your screen, Permit Sonoma Housing. Following the close of the comment period, we'll compile all the public comments that we received and incorporate those comments as appropriate into the revision that will then be submitted to HCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, for their review. And the comment period closes on December 5th. However, you can still provide written comment directly to HCD, and they will consider those comments during their review. Following that, the draft EIR will be published in December, and that will have its own 45-day comment period where we'll be receiving public comment and doing workshops as mentioned. So at this point, I think I'm going to hand it over to Bradley Dunn, our outreach coordinator for the project.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Bradley Dunn. I'm the policy manager for Permit Sonoma as external affairs. And so I worked on the public participation program for the housing element. Next slide. This was the most robust housing element outreach effort that Sonoma County has ever undertaken. And in addition to its robustness, it was also the most equitable. We're going to talk a little bit about the requirements for doing public participation during a housing element, and then go through some of the innovative ways that we reached out to community members from all economic and socioeconomic groups to include a wider variety of voices in this housing element than ever before. So a housing element has state requirements around what we are, who we need to talk to in order to create a housing element. So we have to make a diligent effort to include all economic segments of the community in the development and update of the housing element. Housing elements have to describe who is invited to participate, who actually participated, what kind of comments were received, and how comments were incorporated into the policies of the housing element. And not only do we have to do this during the housing element, but we also have to do this as we move forward with the implementation of the housing element. We're seeking to not only meet all of these legal requirements, but far exceed them. Next slide, please. So in doing the housing element, we created a housing advisory committee. It is you can see the members here. I'd like to thank Joanne Brown, who's on the screen, and Fred Allenbach, who is in the participants, who both served on the Housing Advisory Committee. We can go to the next slide here. We did a Housing Advisory Committee for a couple of reasons. One, it built relationships with advocates that we have used both for developing the housing element and also for other public participation programs for subsequent policies. It allows for deeper feedback with key leaders. We had, as you saw on the slide before, everybody from for-profit developers, nonprofit developers, housing service providers, community members from every district across the county, all kind of collaborate, go deep into the policies that we have, and be able to have like a deeper discussion than is allowed in some of our kind of standard Saturday morning, Tuesday night kind of meetings. And the diversity that included people with a lived experience of homelessness and farm worker service providers really allowed us to take these deep conversations across the board with a wide variety of different housing advocates in the county. We also use this group extensively to promote public participation opportunities with the organizations that they represented, their clients, and their members, make sure that they were participating in surveys, turning out for public meetings. So it was an incredibly fruitful group, and we're deeply thankful to everybody that participated. Next slide, please. We also recognize that many communities across Sonoma County have not always been listened to by their government for a variety of reasons, including discrimination. And so we wanted to make sure that for people that have not been listened to their government, that aren't likely to show up to a kind of regular public meeting, we got deeper with those communities. So a best practice from the International Association of Public Participation is focus groups, where we compensate groups less likely to show up for their time. This is a picture of a farm worker focus group. You can see me on the left. I believe Eric is the one taking the picture. This was put on by California Human Development, who we partnered with. Next slide, please. So we worked with community benefit organizations to host focus groups. Participants were compensated for their time. These groups of 6 to 10 folks were conducted, asked questions in both English and Spanish. This is a day labor focus group that we did out at the Graydon Day Labor Center. Next slide. The great thing about these focus groups is they really yielded unique findings that we wouldn't have been able to understand if we had only relied on surveys and public meetings for everyone. So, low-income seniors told us about how they had to know the affordable housing system and get on lists months ahead of time to move within the affordable housing system, often to get away from, deteriorating habitability conditions. People with a lived experience of homelessness talked about how if they got jobs and their income changed, it often meant that they were no longer able to afford, qualify for the affordable housing that they were in, but didn't earn enough to graduate to the next level of housing. Farm workers talked about habitability issues and their fear of retaliation and discrimination from landlords. People with developmental disabilities talked about access to the mall and transit as key priorities for being able to access the services and different community benefits that they needed. Disability rights advocates talked about the visibility and key access as key priorities. Day laborers were really excited about mobile home parks, an interesting finding that we hadn't anticipated. And Black residents talked about how the lack of Black folks in Sonoma County would make them consider leaving the county if they needed to find new housing, largely because of the expense. So these are all unique findings that we were able to do. We also, did focus groups with people that operate their own small farms and, other kind of key focus groups with people that don't speak English in order to make sure that these perspectives were heard. Next slide. We also, in addition to the 2 public meetings that had about 145 participants, we also had a robust survey program and survey strategy. So we had, and we can go to the next slide here. We had 3 surveys that asked the public about needs, opportunities, values, and specific housing policies. We utilized partnerships with community benefit organizations where we compensated them for sending emails out to their clients, their constituents, their members. We did digital advertising that was specifically targeted at hard to reach communities, especially Spanish speaking communities. And we utilized Permit Sonoma's lists to expand the reach of our efforts. Across the 3 surveys, 6,378 people participated, broadly reflecting the county's demographics, especially economically. Results hewed close to the midpoint on trade-offs between density and neighborhood character, unit size mixes, and whether we should be pursuing faster, reducing barriers for faster development, or whether we should make sure that we had robust public input. Overall, concerns about housing development included the availability of water and sewer, which was number 1, vulnerability to fire, increased traffic, and building housing that's too expensive for everyday Sonoma residents. This was also kind of mirrored in concerns that we were building a lot of second homes or homes that would be vacant a lot of the time, as well as building vacation rentals rather than housing for regular people. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Eric, who was a great partner in this to make sure that not only did we do this key outreach and engagement, but we also integrated all of these findings into the policies and proposals that you see in the draft plan today before you.
Great, thank you, Bradley. And I apologize, it looks like my camera has just died, so I'm going to proceed with audio. Talking about the RHNA a little bit. So based on population forecast, for those who not familiar with this term, the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, often referred to as the RHNA for short. It's based on population forecasts developed by the California Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD. And they produced the RHNA on this 8-year cycle for the entire state and assigned portions of it to regional governments. In our case, that is ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments. And they in turn assign a share of that RHNA to each city and county. And the county does not build the housing, but we must identify and zone sites to accommodate the number of units in the RHNA. So the RHNA is just a number. It's more than a number, and we'll get into it. In this case, you'll observe between the last cycle and this cycle, there's been a substantial increase in the allocation that we've been assigned. For the entire Bay Area, you'll observe in the last cycle 187,000. This time around, 441,000. And in the unincorporated county, that went from 555 from the last cycle to 3,800 in this cycle. So breaking that number down a little further, it is divided into income categories, which are all based on percentages of area median income. They are divided into lower income units, which are subdivided into extremely low, very low, and low, moderate income units, and then the above moderate, all adding up to that 3,824 total. Breaking it out a little more, the shaded rows are totals, and the unshaded rows are subtracted from those totals. So from the top, the total RENA allocation separated out by income categories. Going down, we have what's currently in the pipeline, so to speak. These are projects that are in some kind of permit process or currently in construction. Those are planned and approved units. We deduct those from the RENA totals. We have a projected ADU development for the RENA cycle. So the state allows us to take an average from a number of years of prior development and project the number of ADUs on an annual basis, coming up with this total, and deduct that as well. So the remaining credits appearing in that gray row are further deducted by sites that are already zoned for housing, already existing sites zoned for housing that are underutilized or currently vacant. And then we have the remaining need total, which, following the rezoning of sites for housing, we expect that that total will be completely addressed. So by the end of the process, we will have a compliant housing element that meets the RENA. A couple of, it's required to meet the RENA, a couple other requirements from the state. The county needs to demonstrate appropriate zoning to accommodate the share of the RENA for the lower income households. Regardless of the RENA, all local governments must include zoning for a variety of housing types, such as multifamily, permanent supportive housing, homeless navigation centers, homeless shelters, employee and farm worker housing. State law also requires ACD to look at how sites are zoned for low income or integrated throughout the community. So housing sites for low income cannot be concentrated in any specific area. They should be distributed throughout the Sonoma County unincorporated area. Another requirement from the state, this is a new requirement this time around, the requirement to prepare an assessment of fair housing, identifying factors that are obstacles to local fair housing issues, and include programs in the housing action plan to address those. And I'll also mention that if we don't have a housing element that complies with all these laws, it affects the county's eligibility for state funding for housing, for transportation, and furthermore, there's the potential for us to lose local land use authority for housing development. So lots of components that make up the housing element document, and they include household characteristics, typical demographics, income, race, ethnicity, age, etc., constraints on housing development, such as land use regulations, permitting, cost of construction, documentation of the accomplishments during the previous housing element cycle, all the things from the last housing element that have been diligently worked on, documenting the extensive public outreach and input that we've conducted for the new housing element, including workshops like this one, the inventory of sites for housing, and the goals, policies, and programs. So speaking briefly about goals, the goals are these broader statements that are sort of the broader ideals, sustaining existing housing programs and housing units, promoting the use of urban housing sites, increase production of affordable housing units, and then maintain and promote the expansion of affordable housing and housing for special needs, and encourage equitable and sustainable housing. So these are sort of the vision statements. And when we go down to programs, the programs are the implementation mechanism to achieve the goals and realize the policies in the housing element. So to varying degrees, the programs address the following: the state requirements constraints and needs unique to the community, all the unique input from our community, the RENA goal, the number of housing units that we have to accommodate, and address the programs from the previous housing element and evaluate their success, and the successful programs will continue through the new housing element cycle. So that is the end of staff's presentation. Once again, we are in the public comment period now. The comment period closes on December 5th. However, there is still the opportunity to send written comments directly to HCD for their consideration while they review our draft. And following this milestone, the draft EIR will be published in early December, and it will have its own 45-day comment period. There'll be a workshop at Planning Commission, as I mentioned earlier, to address the EIR. And a couple other upcoming planning efforts that we wanted to highlight with this opportunity. There are the kickoff, and I'll defer to Planning Supervisor Ross Markey to give us a little bit more detail on these. Recently, we've begun the process of updating the environmental justice and safety elements. The local coastal plan is at a draft stage. Ross, can you give us any detail on the local coastal plan?
Sure. Yeah, hi, I'm Ross Markey. I'm the comprehensive planning supervisor here at Permit Sonoma. And so the local coastal plan, we just had a workshop with the Board of Supervisors back in October, and we actually expect to have a final public hearing with the Board of Supervisors coming early next year to adopt our updated local coastal plan. Following that meeting with the Board of Supervisors, we will send our, if the plan is adopted, we would send the plan off to the Coastal Commission for their review and certification. We've also, I'll just continue on, Eric. So we've also recently adopted updates to our vacation rental ordinance, and we have a current moratorium on new vacation rentals in place until May 9th of 2023. The board has asked Permit Sonoma staff to return to review the potential for rezoning different areas of the county that exceed 5 or 10% concentration of vacation rentals in certain neighborhoods. So they've asked us to do some analysis and return to them for some potential rezoning to apply caps in areas that may be overconcentrated. So these slides have live links to our website, and we would be happy to provide them to Ariel, and hopefully she can forward them out. And please feel free to visit our website and send any questions to the project planners, or you can send them my way, and I would be happy to connect you with the planner. Thank you for having us tonight.
And that concludes staff's presentation. We'll take questions from the commission members.
Well, first, I'd like to thank Mr. Gage, Mr. Dunn, Mr. Markey, and Ms. Riley for the presentation that you just gave us. And at this point, I'd like to remind the council that this is a time for questions, not discussions. We will have discussion afterwards, so please save your comments until afterwards. At first, I'd like to go to Chair Ituri of the Springs MAC and ask her to work with her council members on questions for the planning team.
And forgive the interruption. I just want to check on our interpreter, Juan, and see, Juan, give me a thumbs up if you need a break. No break? Okay, then go ahead, Chair Turi.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair Freeman, and thank you for the presentation, Permit Sonoma. So reminder to the Springs Municipal Advisory Council, this is the question portion of the event. So I'll do a roll call and everybody will get an opportunity to ask a question. If you don't have one, just let us know. Thank you. Joe Hardiman. Is Joe with us? Do you have any questions, Joe?
I'm here. I have no questions at this time.
Thank you, Joe. Celeste, do you have any questions?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Hannah?
Sorry, had to unmute. Yeah, I have a lot of questions. One question that came from another council member who couldn't make it was, equity and sustainability were listed as a goal, but what does that really mean in regards to the actions PRMD is taking? And then I have a ton more, but could you speak about what you're doing to preserve mobile home parks, because those remain a key affordable housing area for us in the Valley. And then I also want to kind of hear your thoughts on, state level laws like AB 68, SB 9, SB 10 have, provided state level upzoning for areas, for everywhere. And it kind of makes some of the upzoning done under the Springs specific plan seem negligible. So I'm just kind of wondering, it feels like we're almost behind. After, some of these efforts seem like they've been superseded by these state laws. So if you could talk about that a bit, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I'll try to address those in turn. Regarding sustainability, there are ongoing programs in the housing element that refer to our other county programs, such as the loans and the work of Sonoma Clean Power, our joint power authority that provide rebates for residential upgrades that will increase energy efficiency, water usage in various ways. There's also the more fundamental benefit of multifamily residential in that it doesn't use water for things like landscaping at the same rate as single family residential. So multifamily residential has its own benefits that are environmental. I think that I might let Jane Riley talk a little bit about the equity requirements that are now enshrined in state law and are required to be incorporated into our housing element. And if Jane is able to join us, I'd be happy to see the floor to her. Great.
I think I'm here. So the equity requirements that are required for the housing element, some of the equity requirements will be enshrined in the housing element as they speak to affirmatively furthering fair housing. That's kind of what the statutory requirement is. The ones that are housing related will be within the housing element. So we went through an exhaustive process of examining, doing a fair housing assessment and examining the different factors that contribute to the lack of people being able to access fair housing. There are obviously so many things, and then we have to prioritize them down to the 4 to 6 that HCD wants to see and come up with specific programs to address each of those. So you'll find those in the housing action plan and in the fair housing assessment of the housing element. There are some equity factors that are not as much housing related, or housing is only a small part of them, and there will continue to be addressed in the environmental justice element that the county is preparing now. Eric, do you want me to talk about mobile home parks and state laws?
Before you do, Jane, I just want to jump in and say that also in terms of how we conducted the housing element, we prioritized equity in terms of our outreach and engagement. And you can see that, throughout the presentation, but one of the benefits of doing that is it legally requires us to take the input that we received and address it in the housing element. And so by making sure that we heard new and alternative voices compared to some of the typical, groups of people that show up to government meetings on a Tuesday night. We therefore had to address those concerns. And you mentioned the importance of the mobile home parks, right? That was something that was brought up by our day labor focus group as one example of how we responded to those kinds of things. And then back to Jane.
Oh, thanks. So I think specific to the mobile home park question, we do have a program in there to let me back up. The county has a program for conversion of mobile home parks. It's been very effective. You have to go through a lot of rigmarole to get a mobile home park closed or to convert it to another use. It takes a use permit and really stringent relocation assistance. The only time it's worked in the unincorporated county has been with the I can't think of the name of the development, Siesta Way. So that one, which was converted to senior affordable housing, and that was kind of an attrition. They let the mobile home park residents move away for many years before they actually moved to close the park. So it's tough to do a mobile home park conversion already, but there is a program in the housing element or consideration of a program in the housing element that would readopt some previous measures that the county had in place to give mobile home residents more of a say in the conversion of their parks. The county many years ago lost a court case because it was already occupied by state law. The state law then turned around and adopted what basically the county had in their ordinance. So there's a potential for the county to readopt that. I don't think it was a priority in the housing element because there is not a big push for conversion of mobile home parks in the current market. But that's something that could certainly come up and be done. Do you want me to jump to the state laws?
Sure, let's just be concise in the interest of time. I'm sure we've got a lot to go through yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to address the one thing about the Springs plan and SB 9, SB 10. SB 9 we don't count on in housing elements because we just don't know how much potential there really is out there. So we don't count on development of units and accessory dwelling units for to really up how much housing can be produced. We are, however, using a state enabling program, which is SB 10. So there's an SB 10 program within the housing element to allow multifamily in urban residential zones, where previously it has only allowed up to 3 units in cottage housing developments. And I just don't think that those new laws allow the same kind of development. I'm sorry, I have a new puppy who's being very needy here. Allow the same kind of development that the upzoning and change zoning in the Springs specific plan is going to allow. So I don't see a conflict there.
Thank you.
So we have, are there more responses to Hannah's questions? Okay, then I'll move on to our last council member, Iris.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, thanks. I have several questions. My sense is that no one that was involved in writing the report actually visited the Springs here. Is my impression correct? Or did anyone actually visit the Springs? We have a fairly unique situation here. Do you want me to continue with questions or?
Yeah.
Okay. Does the county do anything to remind landlords of their obligation to tenants? The situation that Daniel Levitas cited is continued in other areas of the Springs. It makes for very uncomfortable living for a lot of people. Have the surveys taken into account discomfort over immigration status and the unwillingness of people to basically stick their heads out and make comments? Seniors in the extremely low to low income groups who are renting are always fearful of losing their housing. Because if anything goes up, they can't, they pretty much can't afford to live where they live anymore. Also, were Zoom meetings employed? Thank you.
Well, I can take the meetings component. The 2 public workshops we did were on Zoom, but we also supplemented those with focus groups, including farm worker focus groups, including day laborer focus groups, non-English speaking focus groups, other types of focus groups to make sure that we got robust participation from community members. I would note that on our slide, specifically talking about farm worker housing, that was specifically input that was cited by, on the slide, was that farm workers told us that they had concerns about discrimination and retaliation for landlord, for habitability issues, and that there are programs specifically in the housing element that address that. Jane can talk about, or Eric can talk about the robustness of those programs, but they do involve informing landlords of their, tenant requirements and additional other types of outreach. Yeah.
So if I could ask that the commissioner repeat any questions that have yet to be answered, or maybe 4 to 6 questions.
I don't know that they're all questions, Eric. I think some of them are appropriate for comments to be submitted so that we can consider those. After the close of the public comment period, we're statutorily required to consider for a minimum of 10 days all the comments that we get and integrate them as appropriate. I think some of your questions and comments that you have tonight are not something that we can easily answer in this forum and be able to fit everyone in. So some of them may have to be submitted.
I did ask if anyone had actually visited the springs to do that. And that seems like a relatively simple thing to answer.
The answer is yes.
Okay. And in how many instances, please?
If the uniqueness of the springs is not addressed in the housing element, we welcome feedback and comments on how to incorporate more of that uniqueness.
Probably for me, myself personally, probably 7 times in the past year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. That ends the Springs MAC questions. Thank you.
Chair Freeman, you are on mute.
Just as most people would like me. So looking to Vice Chair Dawson, I believe, will you be taking the turn with your group, or will that be?
That's me. Thanks. I'll defer to Chair Eagles. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great. Sorry about that.
No worries. Yeah, no worries, Chair Freeman. Thank you. And thank you, Permit Sonoma presenters. So yeah, I'll go through our crew and see if anyone has questions. Vice Chair Dawson, I'll start with you. Do you have questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple things. In looking at the maps in the housing element, I noticed that, my question is how are sites identified? And part of that comes out of looking at the maps, and there's there's a number of sites in Sonoma Valley, but there's no sites in the Kenwood area, no sites in the Bennett Valley area. So that I was just a little bit surprised and just curious how sites were chosen. And then, and this may be more appropriate for commenting on the draft EIR, but the site that's in downtown Glen Ellen is, has a historic building on it, but apparently the housing element doesn't call this out. So I thought that the overall density proposed for Glen Ellen was okay, but I'm a little more concerned about where it happens and how it happens. And so, my other question is, so how are sites identified, and then do the Glen Ellen development and design guidelines come into play for these proposed housing units? And I think that's my yeah, those are basically my two questions.
So I think Jane will be able to address the initial site selection process generally.
Sure, just generally. So the sites inventory in a housing element is a listing of the sites that have appropriate zoning and utilities to serve housing that can be developed for lower income households, so 20 units and above. And so by matter of course, in order to do that in Sonoma County, you have to have a site that's on sewer, public sewer and water. And so we can only look in urban service areas for those sites. And then we look to the zoning to see if the sites have appropriate zoning. So, and there are a whole bunch of rules that the state has about sites that you can use in inventory. And if you've used them before, you have to make certain findings to use them again. And if they're already developed, then you have to do an analysis of the potential for redevelopment and so on. So it's a big, ugly, complicated thing, but the basic parameters are they need to be zoned to allow 10 dwelling units per acre, which translates to 20 dwelling units per acre under the county's by right housing opportunity area programs. And they have to have sewer and water available. In addition to that, we also have to consider where they're located in terms of affirmatively furthering fair housing. So we're not concentrating all of the sites in a low resource area. And a low resource area is one where the residents don't have the same access to the good schools and parks and transit and so on that people in higher resource areas do. So it's an attempt to equalize the access to high resources. So in terms of why sites in Bennett Valley aren't in there, they're not in there because they're not on sewer. Sites in Glen Ellen, I thought we did have Glen Ellen sites in there as part of a rezone project. But I didn't actually work on that part, so I'm not able to speak to those today.
And I think that the commissioner's comments are accurate, that the design guidelines, are to mitigate impacts. And I think that, as you put it, the proper venue for discussing development impacts is the EIR, and I'm going to defer that question until we have it published.
Could I just like have one follow-up?
Sure.
Jane, you mentioned something about, and I forget the wordage, but something about sites that were zoned for 20 units could have 20, according to some sort of homeowners' rights. I think that was the language you used.
It's the county's housing opportunity area program, which allows a site that's zoned for 10 units an acre to actually develop 20 units per acre if 40% of the units are affordable.
Okay, thanks.
Council Member Nardo Morgan, do you have any questions?
Oh, thank you, Chair Eagles, and thank you, Permit Sonoma, for the presentation. Arthur actually asked one of my questions, but I have another one. How were the Housing Advisory Committee members selected? Was this something that was a self-selection, or what exactly was the criteria there?
Yeah, so I can address that through the chair. We had a application that went out through all of our email lists. We sent requests for community benefit organizations to nominate people and to to have people apply. We asked members of the Board of Supervisors to nominate priority candidates for us to follow up with. So we got about 75 applicants for what was 15 spots, and we had a lot of really great candidates. So we expanded the group to, I believe, 23 at the end of the day. To try to encourage participation and get a variety of unique perspectives. So in terms of picking people out of that 75, obviously like completeness of applications, and then ties to a variety of community groups making sure that we had participation from all of the kind of different slots that we had. So for example, a person with a lived experience of homelessness, somebody from the agricultural community, a member of the faith community, one person from every district, for-profit, nonprofit developers, those kinds of slots. And then we tried to, based on the applications we had, use the jigsaw puzzle to, highlight the most qualified candidates that had compelling applications in terms of their answers to why they wanted to participate and, their willingness to serve as ambassadors for the project to the community and to discuss, these issues with their peer advisory council members.
Thank you.
Council Member Newhouser, any questions?
Yes, thank you. And thank you to the Permit Sonoma and your consultants on preparing a really thorough presentation. Do have some questions. I have several comments. I would have preludes to each of my questions, but at your request, I will set aside my comments until later and try to ask the questions without a prelude. It's hard because many of these questions are based upon issues such as SDC and the lessons we have learned through the development of the special plan. But one of the issues that the basic question is, what is the county doing to push back on the unreasonable RHNA demands, given that we have, post-fire issues such as traffic constraints, evacuation routes. We also now have ongoing drought, limited water resources. Even in this valley, we have limited sewage treatment and overflow problems related to that. I mean, we have, this is about, gets to your sustainability goal. What is the county doing, and are they actually so tied to the funding that comes from the state by meeting the RHNA demands, or is the county pushing back because of issues that gets to the point of sustainability? And if so, are you banding together with other counties to dispute these unreasonable increases in the demands? And I have two other questions, but I'll let you respond to that one first.
Bradley, I've heard you give a very cogent answer to this question.
Happy to do that. So as Eric described earlier, we are obligated to fill the regional housing need allocation based on what is assigned to us from California HCD to the Housing and Community Development to the region through the Association of Bay Area Governments. We appealed that allocation because, as you said, we have deep concerns about the number of sites that have urban services, as Jane mentioned earlier. And we have, a policy of city center growth in the county to encourage limits on vehicle miles traveled, transit-oriented development, and other key goals. So we appealed the RHNA allocation because our RHNA allocation increased by six times, and we were turned back by the state. So one of the policies that Jane, Eric, and Ross have been pursuing in the housing element is to create a sub-region that would allow us, along with other jurisdictions, to what we believe is more equitably allocate regional housing so that there would be more city center growth and more city allocations. But, as of, where we are, we wish that cities would take on more of these allocations. But that hasn't come to happen in terms of cities being willing to voluntarily take these allocations. So we hear you in terms of the concern about the increase of housing, but we also know that, throughout the unincorporated portion of Sonoma County, there are, significant needs for housing, that people, want to live in unincorporated parts of the county, and, we need to provide housing for people to do so. We don't want people to have to, come from far away and, exacerbate vehicle miles traveled and our undermine our greenhouse gas emissions goals because there is no housing in important parts of the unincorporated county as well.
Well, that's a great segue to my next question. Thank you for that response.
You're welcome. I'm glad to tee you up.
Well, I mean, it's like, infinite growth is inherently unsustainable. I think we all know that, but it's, it's the elephant in the room, so to speak. But getting to your point about, the demand for affordable housing, I want to not just housing, but affordable housing. And this is, even in your own plan, you're the least fulfilled goal is for the very low housing. We know that it's over 800 units that you're still trying to fill, but there's an issue also that we're currently losing a lot of our affordable housing. And I'm trying not to make a comment, but I'd like to discuss this mobile home park business because we're losing our mobile home parks, and I think conversion should not be the goal. And I'm wondering, is it because it's being converted, it's being speculated on, and it's being converted to market rate housing, and that will be what happens if the free market rules this process. And so what I'm wondering here, and the question is, are the new zoning requirements that you're incorporating into this, first off, I want to know, are there going to be implementation measures developed to actually put some teeth in this plan? Because we all know the general plan and the housing element are all just basically wish lists without implementation measures. Will the new zoning requirement address the problem with the reversion of affordable housing to market rate housing?
So before Jane hops on, I would just say that, the program with regard to the mobile home parks is in order to prevent conversions, right? It's additional requirements if there is an attempt to convert that property away from a mobile home use. So that provides significant protection to avoid the impacts that you're talking about. And then Jane can talk about the implementation measures better than I can.
Sure. So for any implementation measure in the housing element, you have to have specific things. You have to have a timeline of when it's going to be done, who's doing it, and how it's going to be funded. And so that's statutory requirement for implementation measures. Additionally, for any implementation measure that's put into place in order to address one of the factors that's contributing to the lack of fair housing, you have to have specific metrics for that measure. Like through this measure, we plan to preserve 34 very low income units or whatever it is. We do have, the housing element does contain a program to prevent conversion of affordable units, what we call assisted units, to market rate during the housing element period. We have to actually look a little beyond the housing element period. We have to look forward for 10 years. The statutory requirement is only to look at the units that have public assistance. From certain agencies, we've looked at all the units that are potentially going to expire and included them in the program. So we've done more than we can, but there's never enough to save them all.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. I know it's a challenge, and I was just trying to get not to the specifics of, the specific implementation measures, and I understand they have to be very specific, but it's just good to hear that you're actually working on that. I was looking for more of a general answer to this and to address what's being lost. It's just like the vacation housing. If we don't limit that, and it's really the coastal commission, I guess, is allowing to put limits on that. That's really good news. And I'm hoping the county is willing to take that on and to further close those loopholes that are resulting in the loss of more of affordable housing. Let's see, I had one other question, but I think I'll hold off and let other folks take the floor. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Mark. Council Member Handren, do you have any questions?
Yes, just a quick question on vacation rentals. They're at least a contributory factor in the county's housing crisis. Can you quantify how significant of a factor vacation rentals are, and how much of a difference do you anticipate the proposed policy will have on this problem?
Ross, I want to know if you're familiar with the ongoing vacation rental moratorium and the recent update. I don't have specific details on it, but I can call out that there is a housing element program that specifically identifies a need to incentivize rentals, long-term rentals, incentivizing long-term rentals in favor of 30-day or shorter term rentals that are typical for vacation rentals, and to further evaluate options to mitigate the loss of those residential uses becoming businesses. There is a considerable amount of data in terms of vacancies in the housing element that I think that Four Leaf and Jane, our consultant, have developed and presented in that document. So there's a great deal of data that seems compelling in terms of gauging the effect of these proposed programs. I don't think we can do more than speculate. Ross, do you have any details that you can share on the vacation rental ordinance and the status of it?
I think you
Okay.
said it, Eric. I think it's the programs or the data that we have in the housing element that talks about vacancy is that is a big impact. With the vacation rental ordinance, we did contract with the economics department at Sonoma State to review the impact of vacation rentals on housing stock within the county. And we do have a report that was made available through that project. So I would say for any additional vacation rental information, please do visit our vacation rental website, and also look out for upcoming planning commission and board hearings.
Thanks.
Mickey, anything else? You're on mute.
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And council member Susan Oldroyd, you have not joined. I don't see you, but I don't think you've joined. Speak up, please, if you have. Otherwise, I think it's just me. I have a couple of quick questions. I think they're pretty much numbers questions. So the first one is, will the SDC development housing units be metered in or factored into these 8-year chunks for the housing element over time? That's my first. What will they count eventually, and how toward the RHNA requirements? And my second question is, in your RHNA allocation slide that you showed, you have very low income all the way up to above moderate income. Are those numbers handed down to you from the state based on demographic data, or do you have any play in those numbers? Could you do more affordable if you could, and what would influence that? This is probably a pretty basic question, but I just don't understand how that process happens. Those are my two. Thank you.
Right. So the last question is the easier to answer. The answer is that the RHNA is handed down to us, and all of its little segments are also they're handed over from HCD and ABAG, and we don't have a whole lot of say into those different categories. Regarding the other question.
Yes, you want me to take that?
Sure, go ahead.
So This is a great question, and it gets to something that I wanted to talk about and haven't been able to yet, and that is the dynamic nature of the housing sites inventory because of some new laws that have passed recently that are called no net loss laws. Local jurisdictions are now required to keep track of every single project that comes through their doors and every single site that they have an inventory, and never allow that inventory to get below what you still need to have appropriately zoned to meet your remaining regional housing need. So if there are sites in there that get developed for something else or don't get developed as affordable like they were listed, then the county's got to find other sites to replace them in this inventory. And so with the SDC, as you know, I don't have to tell you about the SDC project and what that proposes and when that might be approved. But in order for us to be able to use SDC sites within the inventory, we would have to have a letter committing to building it out from the jurisdiction which has control, which happens to be the state. So those sites are not currently eligible to be included, but they could be later in the 8-year period. So those sites and then sites that might be upzoned as a part of the Springs plan could also be integrated at a later time into the housing element as part of this ongoing dynamic inventory of sites. I think that's really exciting, but it's,
so we have those 3 specific plans in total that are waiting to come online, and as they do, we have the opportunity to include them in the inventory, assuming that they can be developed within the 8-year time frame.
Okay, and if not, do they get included in the next one, or are they split or prorated, or to be determined?
They could be
not
included in the next
yeah,
one.
they'd be included in the next one.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Okay,
We're gonna do this again in 8 more years.
right. Okay, thank you. Back to you, Chair Freeman.
Thank you, Chair Eagles. I want to thank the North Sonoma Valley MAC for their questions. And at this point, I'd like to turn to the commissioners on the Sonoma Valley Citizens Advisory Commission. And I will start with our esteemed Secretary Spalding and ask her if she has any questions. Unmute. You're on mute, Secretary Spalding. You're on mute, Secretary Spalding.
I think she's having trouble unmuting, Chair Freeman.
Okay.
So maybe go to
I'll go on to the
else.
next.
Yeah.
I'll go on to the next and come back. Commissioner Vella.
No, I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Pulverenti.
I have no questions at this time.
Thank you. Commissioner Dombach.
Yes, thank you. I have one question. Many of my other questions were answered already. And I also want to compliment Permit Sonoma on the thorough housing element document as well as the presentation. My question is really one to just get clarity around the utility and estimation of ADUs. So it seems as though there are approximately 588 across the different income categories. And my question is, those are the proposed developed ADUs, but how are we understanding how many of those ADUs are actually being utilized versus vacant? And how do we understand the insurance of the distribution across the different economic levels? It may be a naive question, but I'm just not very clear about how you're calculating in the ADUs.
I think that's a good question, and I've heard Jean answer it before, so I'm gonna let her take it again.
It's a great question. So there's a couple of things at play here. One is that the HCD, Housing and Community Development, allows us to count ADUs as a unit that hits the ground. Once you build a unit, you've added a unit to the housing stock. They're not looking to see how it is occupied. It's a unit that you can count. But remember that no net loss law? If we say, okay, we're going to build this many ADUs and they're going to rent for this affordability levels, we're basing those affordability levels that we're claiming off of studies that were done by ABAG for our area and approved by HCD. So they've approved that to be our kind of bottom line. That's our safe harbor. If we use that, they'll buy off on it. So we've used that, but the story doesn't stop there, because halfway through the planning period, you have to go back and say, okay, let's survey all the accessory dwelling units. What's happened? What are they really renting at? And if they're being occupied for nothing, that's an extremely low income unit if you're not charging rent for it. But if they're being, used occasionally for guests and they're not being rented at all, then that's going to be a problem when it comes to this no net loss part. And so the housing element does contain a program to halfway through the housing element period, do that survey and reevaluate what they are actually being rented for. And if we're not meeting the marks that we set out, then we have to do additional things like provide funding for the Napa Sonoma ADU Center, who provides loans for low-income households and all that kind of stuff. So that's a great question, and we are speculating. The county does build annually the number of accessory dwelling units that are being claimed overall. But are they all occupied at the housing or at the affordability levels that they're in the housing element for? Probably not. And there hasn't been a survey done of accessory dwelling units and what they rent at since the allowances went up to 1,200 square feet. So that hasn't been looked at yet, but we also haven't done a survey in the county since the allowances for junior accessory dwelling units, which can be no bigger than 500 square feet, came into play. And so I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I'm suggesting that the county not wait 4 years to do that survey. I think knowing that information a couple of years in would be really helpful in developing more effective programs.
Yes, thank you. And that was going to be my next question. Now that you've explained it, is there any ability for you all to influence that it's not done so many years later, but maybe a little bit more proactively and during time? What's the latitude that you all have to influence that?
Well, the dates that we put in the housing element are dates that it has to be done by. And so certainly the Board of Supervisors can say, permit Sonoma hogwash that you want to wait for 4 years to find out what's really going on. We want you to do a survey every year or whatever it is. I think it'd be premature to do it really early in the housing element period for communities that don't have a good history of accessory dwelling units. But the county has a really good history of building accessory dwelling units. So we also have included a program for a kind of ongoing, I can't remember what we called it, Eric or Bradley, maybe you do, kind of the ongoing committee that's made up of members of the Community Development Commission, the actual commission, not just the staff, but also the staff, Permit Sonoma staff, and members of the community who would advise the department on what to prioritize, what really comes next. And because 8 years is a long time, and there could be new housing needs that arise within that 8 years, and we don't want the county to have to wait for another 8 years and come up with another one of these plans to address those needs. The county needs to be more nimble than that. And so that program is also in the housing element, and that body will be advising the directors of Permit Sonoma and of the Community Development Commission.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dombeck. Going back to Commissioner Spalding, it looks like you're off of mute there. And if you'd like to.
Apologies, technical problem. After all that, I have no questions at this time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Commissioner Ituri, I just didn't know whether you had asked any that. Okay, you're fine.
I'm good. Everybody's got them covered. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hermosillo.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Chrysler.
I've got no questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Truesdale.
What can be done to address the cost of
I'm sorry, your audio is breaking up.
that makes a lot of this not feasible economically?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Truesdale. Okay, she put it on mute. Commissioner Truesdale, I don't know if you can pull your. Okay, well, I think we'll go on and come back to you and see if we can't rectify that issue you're having.
If I may, I think her question was what's being done to rectify the cost of construction. At least that was the beginning of it. So.
Well, maybe there's the opportunity to submit that question in the chat if we're having trouble with audio.
Good idea. Thank you for that. Commissioner Brown.
Thank you. I was really pleased to hear from someone with the expertise that Jane Riley has, that there was a possibility, if not a requirement, that the progress on meeting the state housing requirements be reviewed at least at the 4-year period, and that arguably the Board of Supervisors would have discretion to look at that progress more frequently than that. My question is whether that only applies to ADU or use, or whether it applies to housing in general, because my concern is that the population projections on which the RHNAs were based on really, from everything I can tell, really, and from watching population, not just in the county, but statewide, really are not accurate. And to that extent, we're being driven by some, well-intentioned, but not accurate projections at this time. And is there a point at which we can say, hey, look, we need a second look at this population and where the population really is going, and whether it's decreasing, which it seems to be, of the growth rate. And therefore that has consequences to the housing element and housing requirements. So does that possibility exist for the RHNA requirements overall, or is it only applied to ADUs?
Great question, or set of questions. So the requirement to review progress on all the programs in the housing element actually comes once per year, and the review of site. So that's all done once per year. I'm surprised Eric didn't jump in, because it's his responsibility to prepare that report, and it takes years off his life every year, I'm sure. So that's part of it. So the big question about RHNA, and can the RHNA be reduced when halfway through the housing element period, we're like, look, HCD, we just lost, 100,000 in population. We're not growing, so reduce our RHNA. The answer is no, not through the RHNA process. That won't happen again until the new RHNA methodology period starts 2 years before the next housing element is due. So 2029 will be the next time we get to talk about that, except that when this is a super nuanced and complicated RHNA thing. I sat on the RHNA methodology committee for ABAG. I'm way too familiar with this stuff, so tell me if I go too far. One of the reasons that unincorporated counties got such a big chunk of the RHNA this time is because the lands that were in city spheres of influence, the responsibility for that land used to be assigned to the city. This time, in their infinite wisdom, the ABAG methodology committee assigned it to the unincorporated county. And that means that whenever a city annexes a hunk of land in there, they also have to negotiate with the county to take the RHNA responsibility for that hunk of land. So when we go through annexations over the years, it will be upon the city to take away some of the RHNA annexation. And Santa Rosa has a big annexation coming up. So some of the Reno responsibility will go to the city of Santa Rosa. Cloverdale just had one. They actually took a small bit of the city's Reno. City of Sonoma has not. But if they have annexations coming up, which they do, will be the county will be negotiating with them as well. The bad part is that that doesn't reduce the number of sites that you have to rezone for housing, even though you know it's going to be reduced in the future when these annexations occur. The statutory obligation is still that you have to rezone adequate sites to meet the RENA that we have in place right now.
And let me just add to that, the housing element, the housing action plan contains 30 odd programs, and each one has several sub-programs, and all of them have timelines for completion. And as Jane alluded to earlier, we'll be reporting on their annual progress. But prioritization is something that would be useful to get feedback on. So I would encourage commissioners to review those programs, and if there are priorities, please identify them and thereby improve the things that we're already committed to doing.
I just had one other comment, which had to do with the housing element process. Bradley Dunn et al. led. I was really pleased about it, and I've been involved in a lot of these, and I thought there was a real genuine effort to really get broad participation and to ask the tough questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. I was able to get a question from Commissioner Truesdale. Her question was, what can be done to address construction costs to make the plan a reality?
So that's another. You got it, Eric? Hey, if you got it, go for it.
I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
And you can build on what I've identified. So there are a number of programs in the county already. Some of them are density bonus programs. Some of them are concessions that relate. So if you have a low income project and you're going to have a certain percentage of affordable housing in it, you can get various concessions on development standards, on other height requirements, things like that, parking in particular. But there are various ways to increase density with affordable housing, thereby making the project more units per area and getting value that way. But also there are mechanisms by which you can forego some development standards and requirements that are very costly in terms of area and in terms of development and construction. Parking is the one that's probably the most intuitively obvious, because if you reduce the parking, you have more space for units. Jane, do you want to build on that?
Exactly right, Eric. Reducing the cost per unit, and the construction cost is what is known as a non-governmental constraint to housing. So it's something that we do have to address. Government has limited choices on how they can directly address that, what a construction cost is. So we're stuck with reducing the cost per unit of housing. And we do that through all the ways that Eric just talked about, as well as some newer, more innovative ways, like working with the community land trust, the housing land trust, in order to reduce the cost further by taking the land cost out of the equation. So it's a tough one. I wish we could have like all kinds of inclusive programs to train more people and have all these really great, programs for the trades and that kind of stuff is just outside of the realm of the housing element, I'm afraid. I hope that answers the question.
I believe that does. Thank you so much for that. I would like to turn now to Commissioner Felder.
I have no questions at this time.
Very good. Thank you, sir. And at this point, I'd like to then turn to Commissioner Branfitt and see if he has any questions that he'd like to profit.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Commissioner Carr.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'll hold off until afterwards.
Very good. Thank you so much. Okay, that pretty much takes up all of the questions that the Sonoma Valley Citizens Advisory Commissioners have. And at this point, I think I'd like to thank all the commissioners. And I think at this point, Commissioner Ituri, if you would again make the translation access announcement, I'd greatly appreciate that.
Thank you, Chair Freeman. Si hay alguien que necesita servicio de interpretación, por favor hagan un clic en el globo a pie de la pantalla donde dice interpretación y escoge español. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias. Now, at this point, I'd like to thank the presenters, but we are going to keep you here a little longer. We're now going to open for public comment. I'd like to ask folks who want to make public comment to raise their hands now. And for those who are on by phone, please hit *9 for you phone attendees. We'd like to establish the order and get a sense of how many folks there are who want to comment.
And before we actually go to public comment, I wanted to check one. Do you need 5 minutes? Yeah, okay. I think we need to take a 5-minute break before we go to public comment. Give our valiant interpreters some time to get some water. And so we will return at, let's see, what's 5 minutes? 8:22.
Put up the timer?
Yes, I'm going to put up a slide that says that we'll return at 8:22.
Very good. Thank you much.
Don't cancel Joey's flight. Are you doing laundry?
Some of you are not on mute. I just want to let you know.
So Chair Freeman, whenever you're ready, can make sure everyone's back and then go to public comments.
Certainly. Thank you. I think I'll give it one moment. There's a lot of names without pictures attached right now, so let's hold on just a second here.
And what amount of time would you like for public comment?
I'm looking at it and I think that based on the hands that are up, I think that it's reasonable to expect that we can give people 2 minutes, but just to remind them, let's do 90 seconds, I'm sorry, 90 seconds. And please, everybody will just realize that if somebody has stated something that you have a feeling about, please just say that you agree with the comments made by whomever it was that made those, if you can, in the art of brevity. And please use respectful language and avoid personal attacks. That's all we ask of people here. And look forward to comments from the community.
Okay, I will get the clock up. Give me 1 second. So first we have Dan, followed by James, and then Celia. So Dan, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for your work on this. I would like to make a couple of questions. The first is that while I agree that population growth in California is slowing, California already has such a population so much more population than housing, and Sonoma Valley in particular has so much more population than housing. I, for example, no longer live in Sonoma Valley despite still working in Sonoma Valley. I am part of the problem in that I live far away and drive into Sonoma Valley for work because I couldn't afford a house there. So there really is a huge demand for housing from people who can't afford to live there or who share housing. Part of the reason for that, which has not been touched on, and perhaps that's because it doesn't fit into the housing element, is that there's a huge amount of housing that nobody lives in. In fact, a larger number of houses than we are discussing building simply sit empty or are a vacation rental or are somebody's vacation home that they visit 2 weekends a year. And so I would very much urge all the commissioners to think very strongly about how to enact a vacancy tax. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate the comments.
Hello.
Mr. McFadden, I believe you're next. You can start your questions.
Thank you. I'm speaking actually on behalf of the Sonoma Valley Housing Group. Our concerns are three. One is to make sure that Sonoma Valley gets its fair share of county lower income RENA inventory, and that this fair share is spatially distributed in an equitable manner between the various zones and areas. Secondly, we want to see that renters, essential workers, and disadvantaged communities get fair and accurate treatment in all housing element components. And finally, we want to have the housing element identify and accurately describe poverty in the largely Latinx census tract 1503.05 and contrast this with racially concentrated areas of affluence. Sonoma Valley unincorporated housing is marked by increasing luxury homes on septic and wells outside the urban service area. The demand for luxury high-end housing is great, but this demand is not in any way a need or necessary. It's the lower AMI cohort that has the huge bulk of housing needs. The dire circumstances of Census Tract 1503.05 tend to be ignored, underplayed, and lowballed by the local and county powers that be. The goodwill of local nonprofits is relied on to offset weak government responses to mitigate what amounts to an exploitive plantation economy with unaddressed structural segregation.
James, that does include the time, but thank you.
I just want to point out, I'm sorry, I didn't say this at the beginning, but if you do have longer comments, please make sure that you submit via email to Ariel. We'll put her email address in the chat box so that you have that for anybody who wants to add to their comments. So thank you.
Yes, I will do that after I have finished managing public comment because I cannot type.
Well, it's fine. No, we'll take care of it after. I'm not saying do it now. I'm saying we will get that out there for people.
Perfect. Okay, next we have Celia followed by Cece and then Kim. Celia, you should be able to unmute. And Celia, I see that you have unmuted, but we are not hearing you. It looks like you are having an audio issue, Celia. I'm going to lower your hand, maybe test your mic, and then feel free to try again. Next, we have Cece. Cece, you should be able to unmute.
Hi, my name is Cece Sorello. I'm a resilience manager at Greenbelt Alliance. My colleagues at Greenbelt Alliance have enjoyed being a part of the housing element process and appreciate that so much of our feedback has been taken into consideration. There are so many great policies and programs in this housing element. We're a member of the Sonoma Valley Collaborative and we support their comments in the letter that we collectively sent. We would, however, like to recommend that you include a parking policy update to reduce or eliminate parking requirements for new or redeveloped residential projects. Or at the very least, unbundle the cost of parking at multi-unit projects so residents can choose whether to pay for a parking space. Parking is extremely expensive and those who do not drive should not have to subsidize parking for others. Also, we noticed that many of these great policies do not have dates by when they want to accomplish these things, and we do not see a policy or plan for reporting or tracking the success of these policies. We recommend that you set clear, measurable goals with dates for each of these policies and also mandate that the annual reporting on housing element progress be posted on the front page of a website with a clear dashboard or similar display that indicates progress on implementation plans, along with clear visuals of how Sonoma is meeting its affordable housing goals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Kim, followed by Thomas and then Cindy. Kim, you should be able to unmute.
I am Kim Jones, the coordinator for Sonoma Valley Collaborative. We will submit a letter to staff with detailed constructive comments, so I'll just summarize here. The current draft relies too much on programs of the past, even though the intensity of our housing crisis calls for new approaches. For example, the incentives for producing new housing needs to be stronger, guaranteed, if they are to successfully entice developers to build below market homes in Sonoma Valley's difficult market. The displacement policies and policies to extend deed restrictions are not strong enough to keep middle and lower income people in their current homes. Some of these people are children. Sonoma Valley is hemorrhaging children because too many families can't live here. Our members hope you understand the catastrophic effect of housing costs on every employer, including local and visitor-serving businesses, schools, and nonprofits. We need policies like rent stabilization and just cause eviction, or else we will see more and more local businesses and organizations close their doors and their owners and employees move away. Our members want to see faster, more specific, and more measurable actions across the whole document. We are certain that the state will not accept the vague, negotiable languages of many of the draft programs. Our members from across business, health, youth, environment, faith, and other sectors are united in asking you to call for a stronger, more complete housing element that treats the housing situation as the all hands on deck crisis that it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Appreciate that.
Okay, Thomas, you're next. You should be able to unmute.
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. And my name is Thomas Ells, and I'm the Executive Director of Galen's Gardens, and we are one of the bidders on Sonoma Developmental Center. And that is for historical restoration. And we hope that it would be educationally used. That's highest and best use appears to be educational. It can have educational housing and other types of affordable housing. And I want to address a couple of things, one of which is we think that the specific plan as it's envisioned and with the reduction of the size of the development at Sonoma Developmental Center, that the intensity will be high and it creates an urbanization, an urban zone that will incorporate or include Eldridge and Glen Ellen, which would then make them exempt from certain CEQA requirements for 1 to 6 units on a single family parcel. So there could be an externality with that. And the other thing is we noticed that we have a hospital there, and it's possible to use a hospital. So reuse that hospital as a clinic, as urgent care. There's many things. And potentially from the Springs, for instance, people could come over and be using that for college and so on, which is not really in the area. I just wanted to mention that within the housing, but that's seems to be an issue in the zoning.
Thomas, that does conclude the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Cindy, followed by Nadia, and then Fred. Cindy, you should be able to unmute.
Hi, this is Cindy Scarborough. I am chair of the steering committee for Sonoma Valley Collaborative. I'm also a recent member of the advisory council for the county's Area Agency on Aging and the former executive director of Vintage House Senior Center. Seniors have, there's a tremendous need among the senior population for security in ongoing housing. Our recent needs assessment at the county level identified housing as one of 5 top concerns. Caregiving, health, support services, and transportation were the others. Within the broad category of financial stability, as seniors are growing older and on a limited income, I would particularly like to encourage Permit Sonoma to explore mechanisms for extending and expiring deed restrictions, to begin exploring what kind of fee system or tax can be applied to vacant homes or second homes, and have that revenue go into a housing land trust, and incentivize ADUs so that more families can provide additional living space for family members or others who are in need. And I will try very much to submit written comments. Thank you for what I've learned from tonight's overview and an excellent executive summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate the comments.
Okay, next we have Nidia, and I am so sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Nidia, you should be able to unmute.
Hi, my name is Nidia Figueroa. I'm here representing and advocating for La Luz Center's community members who are often low income and Latino. La Luz Center is a nonprofit organization established more than 37 years ago that provides services to the underprivileged population in Sonoma Valley and is a member of the Sonoma Valley Collaborative. Our clients and community members are being driven out of their homes and communities as a result of increasing rent prices and the continuous threat of eviction. When there is no affordable and safe homes for our low income and Latino community to live in, they will continue to be driven out of this county. This is why we are asking for improvements in the draft for stronger protections for existing lower cost rentals, deed restricted or not, and more of a focus on homes for people with low or very low incomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Nidia.
Okay, next we have Fred and then Celia, and then I'm not seeing any more hands. So if anyone else would like to speak, please raise your hand. Fred, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you. I'll start out with a question. I wanted to ask, what has Permit Sonoma done in the housing element to identify lower income, Hispanic, disadvantaged, unincorporated community, disadvantaged community in the Springs? I did a study myself looking at the 2020 American Community Survey block groups and found that there's a large multi-thousand member community of interest in the Springs, and seems to me that this is an important demographic to recognize and identify. And also, and in the spirit of really wanting to make the housing element better for lower income residents and essential workers, that's where I'm coming from. And I would like to support the Sonoma Valley Collaborative letter, which Sonoma Valley Housing Group is a member of Sonoma Valley Collaborative, and I'm the Sonoma Valley Housing Group member on the council there. And I'd also like to support to Permit Sonoma, the Sonoma County Housing Element Work Group letter, and support especially the Sonoma County Legal Aid letter that has especially points on tenant rights and renters' rights. Sonoma Valley Housing Group is a signatory on those letters as well. I don't know if VMT is, I'll have to wait to the EIR to talk about EMT, and I'm out of time, but if I could have my question answered, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred, for your comments. Appreciate that.
Okay, and now we have Celia. Celia, you should be able to unmute.
Well, hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, great. Sorry about that.
No, you're all good. Thank you.
Okay, so Sonoma Valley Hospital is part of the Sonoma Valley Healthcare District, which serves 45,000. With 345 employees, we are one of the larger employers based in the cities Sonoma and Sonoma Valley. And we are in support of developing housing, specifically affordable housing throughout the valley, including the city of Sonoma. The hospital sees housing insecurity both with our patients and our staff. It contributes to health issues within our community, rent versus prescriptions. It is even an impediment to the recruitment of new graduates and early career physicians. Currently, 70% of staff does not live in the healthcare district, and this number is unfortunately growing. Our workforce represents the missing middle, without which our community will struggle to remain balanced as a live here, work here community. It makes recruitment and retention of hospital employees challenging. We support creative collaborations that yield fair and inclusive results for all in need of housing, for buyers, renters, multi-generation families, individuals, and those currently without shelter. We are part of the Sonoma Valley Collaborative and support their core recommendation as articulated in their statements. I'm Celia Cruz de la Rosa, and I am a director from Sonoma Valley Hospital. Thank you, and thank you to our amazing interpreter. Right on, thanks.
Thank you, Celia, for your comments and for that shout out. I'm not seeing other hands raised. However, Commissioner Iris Lombard has a comment from a neighbor that she'd like to make. We will limit her to the minute and 30 seconds. But if Commissioner Lombard would like to speak, that would be great.
Great. Thank you. Council members, thank you for your time. We share this as a family of 3 who has lived in the same rental in Boys Hot Springs since 2006. My husband is a government employee, and since COVID, he is the single wage earner for us with our 17-year-old son. The house that we have rented is no more than a summer cottage, unsuited for hot summers or cold winters in Sonoma. It is completely uninsulated, some windows still single pane. There is no central air conditioning, only a single window mount in one bedroom and a floor model for the living room that we purchased out of pocket. It has a single gas supplied wall heater in the center of the house, which fails to heat the second bathroom or the main bedroom during extreme cold. Our PG&E bill is almost always at least $350 per month, whether it is cold or hot. More extreme temps bring higher prices always. For our 3-bedroom, 2-bath home with a small yard, we pay $2,100 per month. Every few years since we moved in, we have seen rent increases. When we moved in, $14,000 was our monthly payment. If we ask for repairs that aren't absolutely necessary, we risk our landlord increasing our rent. We have tried finding a home to purchase closer to his work for the last 10 years. Houses have always been just beyond our approval rate. Please recognize that housing as well as utility costs are exorbitant here, and the average family is drowning in costs. It is hard to fathom what families with less resources face when cold hits, along with inflation and rent costs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lombard, for those comments. I am going to look really quickly at our list, and I'm looking, I don't see any other hands raised at this point. I'm going to count backwards from 10, and we will close public comment after that. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you for your public comment. We appreciate your support and showing up. Again, I just want to let people know if they have longer comments and really would like to submit those to everyone, please make sure you get them to Ariel. She will put her excuse me, email address in the chat for you, excuse me. At this point, I would turn back to the Permit Sonoma staff response and see if they have responses to any of the questions that have been asked.
I would ask the chair to repeat any questions that need to be answered.
You're going to make me work. So
I'm afraid.
Yeah,
afraid so.
The one that I picked up on was the one from Fred which sounded like, have you guys identified specific demographic groups in your studies to address? He was specifically concerned about the Hispanic community within a certain demographic area.
So I don't believe that the housing element contains that level of specificity to identify a particular census tract and policies or programs to address it. As many have pointed out throughout the presentation, there are numerous policies and programs to address equity and equity countywide. But Jane, can you address any specifics in this particular area?
Happy to. The fair housing analysis contained within the technical background report does provide all of that analysis for all areas within the county. We do not provide a more in-depth analysis at the block group level, which is what Fred was asking for. The analysis is all provided as statutorily required at the census tract level. And there is some fine tuning, and there's differences between years, and there's places where when you get down to the block level, there are places where there just isn't enough data, so we don't have any census information for those areas. So the focus throughout the county has been on collecting that data, which is all in the fair housing assessment on the census tract level. That is not to say that we haven't found comparatively to that area in Sonoma Valley is very much different from some of the areas near it. There is some discussion of that in the fair housing assessment. I think if Fred has submitted comments, and I think we will be able to, address those comments and also carry some of the concerns forward as the county's working on the environmental justice element as well.
Yeah, and just to follow up what Jane said, Katrina Bramer, who runs the will be running the environmental justice element, isn't here tonight, but so Fred, you are a member of the environmental justice working group, and one of the first things that we will be doing as a part of that is identifying equity priority communities to focus on through the environmental justice component of the general plan update. So these are considerations that we are aware of and are looking at ways to incorporate, even though, for example, the Cal Enviro screen does not necessarily include the Springs as a community. We're looking at going beyond those kinds of Cal Enviro screen requirements in order to make sure that we are adequately looking at unique communities that have equity needs.
Very good. Thank you for that. I appreciate those answers. And I would just ask if any of the commissioners heard questions from the public that have not been answered yet. Please raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask the question. But short of that, I think we will thank our presenters and let them know that we'll be returning them to the audience so that the MACs and SVCAC members can have their final comments about the presentation. We really appreciate the work that you guys have done. We know that it's an ongoing effort and appreciate all the work that you do and that you're here in what are typically off hours, but we really appreciate you fielding the questions and doing the work. So thank you. At this point, Juan, you can give me a thumbs up if you feel like you need another break, or do you think you're fine? Okay, thank you. Just wanted to check on that. At this point, I would turn to our Springs MAC group and ask Chair Ituri to poll her members for any final comments that they'd like to make.
Do you have a time limit on this, Chair, or just?
No, I believe it, as long as everybody's understanding that if they start to wander, that there might be a comment or two. That's all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So I'm looking around the screen. Councilmember Winders.
Yes, thank you. I just I didn't have questions, but I had a comment and concern as an ongoing one. You know, our local school district is experiencing a rapid and extreme decline in enrollment. And we are struggling to be able to maintain staff, both our teaching staff and our classified staff. A lot of our classified staff are in fact our instructional aides and both in the classroom and within special education. And so I really would like to see, when we're discussing housing and we're looking at housing elements, creating certain percentage designation for prioritization for not only our district staff, but also for families. Within the comments that were submitted in writing, I had the opportunity to read them, and I was actually most moved by the ones that were provided by students who are discussing living, you know, 5 and 6 and 7 family members deep in a 1-bedroom apartment, are late getting to school because they're having to go great distances to get to school, the lack of privacy that their families, you know, sort of move and maneuver around in their homes. And, you know, during the pandemic, when we had to shut down the schools, this really became very, very evident. And as our students were learning online and they were all in the living room or they were all in a bedroom, and we were hearing from staff, you know, it's hard to teach when they're in different classes and in the same room. But the reality is that's the only room they have. And so this is really serious. This is impacting our children's well-being and their mental health. This is impacting their ability to show up at school and be ready to learn. And it's impacting our staff's ability to be here and to do what they love, which is educate our children. And so as we look at these housing needs, I really would like us to explore what are the options and in what ways can we create certain percentage of, you know, some priority housing for our staff and for our family, and how can we work in partnership with our school district to help coordinate that effort and put our heads together and really problem solve. Because I want to be really blunt with Sonoma Valley, especially certain areas of Sonoma Valley, you are about to become a town without children. And I think that we have to ask ourselves, is that's really, really who we want to be? Or are we going to concentrate our children and concentrate into dense areas with inadequate and substandard housing? And what will that mean for families? And who gets to receive the best quality of education that they can, and who doesn't, based upon their ability to access resources, if they're spending all their money on rent and just trying to live? So if we could keep that in the forefronts of our mind as we discuss housing and looking at this, I think we best serve our community and the most important members of our community, which are our children.
Thank you. Councilmember Hardiman, do you have a comment?
I fully agree with what Celeste said, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Councilmember Lombard?
Yes, thank you. And I agree with what Celeste said and support that. What I do not feel in this document, these documents, and in many of the communications with the county is the sense of urgency that I certainly feel, and I think many of us who live in the Springs feel for the situation here. We actually, our ship is going down. As Celeste said, if we're losing children, we're losing families. Our population is becoming increasingly elderly. This is not a good situation, and we're losing teachers and hospital staff and all of the above. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Perrott?
I would just say that zoning created this mess and zoning can probably fix it. And it would be great if we could not just zone single parcels, but maybe relax zoning. But I know people are very attached to their zoning. So it's been interesting. Thanks for this and good luck to everyone.
So my comment is, I think that we have an extraordinary community here that has come together on many, many occasions. And this is a solvable problem. And I think that sometimes we have to find ways and pathways forward. And I agree with Celeste, being an educator, that I'm very, very concerned about the decline in enrollment and the number of families that are having to leave this community. I hear about it every single day, and I don't think that's what we want to be. So I think we need to dig deep and figure out how we're going to solve this problem. And I'm not sure that we're there yet. So thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with the SVCAC today. Thank you.
Thank you all for those well-considered comments. I now will turn to Chair Eagle of the North Sonoma Valley MAC for her to poll her members for final comment.
Yes, thank you. Vice Chair Dawson, do you have any final comments?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Eagles. Yeah, I want to thank the Permit Sonoma staff and everybody here who, with all the good thinking and hard work on this. And I totally agree with everything that Celeste said. Those letters that were submitted by the collaborative are just wrenching, really, to read those. And so we need to keep that at the forefront, I think, as we think about housing. And just I'll put in a plug for that idea of, how could we tax second homes and VRBOs so we could actually, so that they could maybe actually support housing for locals. I think that's that the loss of through those things is part of the problem. And that's all. Thanks, everybody.
Councilmember Handren, do you have anything?
No, just quickly, I also want to show my support for the comments made by Celeste and those supporting her from the Springs MAC. I agree with those comments wholeheartedly. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's been a great presentation. Thanks.
And Councilmember Newhouser.
Thank you. Yeah, based on a lot of the feedback from the community and from the housing organizations, including Greenbelt Alliance, what I'm hearing and to basically agree with what the Springs MAC members have said, that we really need to treat this as a crisis and we need to take bold action. And the bold action can include the taxes. We could push for rent control, but I think that if you leave it up to the voters to decide, the voting bloc is traditionally strongest amongst landowners, and which generally resist any change to the tax structure or limitations on the use of their properties. And so this is why it's going to require a strong recommendation from Permit Sonoma to their leadership, to the supervisors, to enact bold measures to reverse this, to treat this as a crisis, and to create the change needed in order to create the subsidies from the tax structure that could then be poured into suggestions such as the housing trust, even public ownership of some of these existing tracts of low-income housing that are at risk of reverting to market rate housing. It's going to take bold action, and it's going to be uncomfortable for those of us who do have homes, but we have to be willing to make that concession. So it's not easy, but thank you so much for your efforts.
Thanks, Mark. And I think that's it for us. I'll just add my thanks for this meeting. This is a very good joint meeting, and I really appreciate all the comments of my fellow council members, commissioners, and the public. And great comments, everyone. Thank you. Back to you, Chair Freeman.
Thank you, Chair Eagles, and thank your members for their comments. I'd now like to turn to the members of the Sonoma Valley Citizens Advisory Commission and ask them for their comments and summaries, starting with Commissioner Spalding.
I did it. Thank you.
It worked. Thank you.
So I have a very brief comment. I think that nobody came into this meeting tonight not knowing the problems, least of all the planning department. You guys have done an incredible job of documenting the crisis. I think also that by and large, you planning department have been tasked by these comments more than it's within your power to do. And I just want to honor the fact that you're doing a great job, it appears to me, and you have limited power and authority. So it's going to take, I think, much more citizen action, continuing the group here tonight, all of us, will be the ones who have to carry this, these demands, taxation, deeds, the whole 9 yards. We can't burden the planning department entirely with doing it. Meantime, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Spalding. I'd like to turn now to Commissioner Avella.
I have no questions or comments, but I just do want to say thank you. This was really interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Commissioner Polverenti.
Yeah, I'm gonna reiterate, I guess, what other people have said, but I first of all want to thank Permit Sonoma for their presentation and the MAC committee members and the public for their thoughtful comments and recommendations. And I want to support what Mark said about, I think it's going to take bold action, and I think it's going to take thinking out of the box, and then adding to what Commissioner Spalding said, it's going to require support from the entire community. We all need to get behind each other to push this through, because surely this is a crisis situation which was already presented by others, but I do appreciate everybody being here and enlightening me about some things that I was not aware of before. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Polverenti. I appreciate that. And Commissioner Dombach.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. I mean, this was an incredibly thoughtful job that Permit Sonoma did, and within the purview of the levers that they have. And I do think, government is limited. I agree with everything that everyone said. I'm a huge advocate of land trusts, and as a community, if we could own the land and really ensure that in perpetuity it becomes affordable or workforce housing. Those are mechanisms that are well established. We have a land trust here that's an agricultural land trust. There's a housing land trust, and really kind of leveraging as much as possible those land trusts to expand that and put those in a nonprofit ownership. That along with the rezoning, I think are levers that we have in this community. There are many wealthy people here in this community, and gathering those folks to try to fund those land trusts are things that I would love to see happen in this community.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you, Commissioner Dombach. Commissioner Ituri, you have a second swipe if you want.
No, I'm fine. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Commissioner Hermosillo.
I just wanted to reiterate that what Micah said was right. This is a solvable problem. We have multiple families living with multiple family members in substandard housing. We have our teachers, as Celeste said, and support staff not being able to afford living here. And I was recently at an event for the fire department, and I was shocked how many first responders do not live here. There's a lot of locals, but I just want us to keep in mind that we have a firefighter coming to work in the valley from Arnold, California. And so we need to do better for what our community will look like in the future. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Hermosillo. Commissioner Chrysler.
Thank you. Great presentation, Permit Sonoma. And really interesting comments, both by the public and my fellow Zoom squares. And one of the things that I was thinking about was the bold action comment. Absolutely agree with that. And one of the things that hasn't been brought up, although it was said that rezoning is something that could go a long way towards solving some of this. One of the things that wasn't said is that although these areas need to have sewers, nobody's talked about expanding the sewer system. And if you look at the sewer system map in Sonoma Valley, it is got a lot of bits and pieces that are sort of broken apart. And that could very well, and I'm not talking about, you know, taking things miles and miles. Sometimes it's taking it across the street and expanding that sewer system so that we can then rezone some of this space and use it for our community members that really need it. Just a thought. Thank you.
For that, Commissioner Chrysler. Commissioner Truesdale, I don't know whether we have good connection, but if you have any comments that you'd like to make.
Thank you. It's great presentation. I have nothing further.
Thank you, Commissioner Truesdale. Commissioner Brown.
Thank you. As really informative as this presentation was, and frankly, the comments by the public and the fellow commissioners here equally informative. I don't want to do this again. I really don't want to have this conversation again. We know in general the issues. There are lots of specifics that I'm sure we can all share if we spent more time in this conversation. But I think really we're at the point of wanting to have some guidance and some ideas from other communities who are dealing with the same issues that we're dealing with. What has worked? What are the limitations? What are the requirements? What's the statutory obligations? What are the financial funding options? What has worked? That's what I'd like to see at our next, and I hope we do have a joint meeting. And where does that information come from? It certainly can come from PRMD. I know they have a lot on their plate, but nonetheless, they have the professional access, but it also comes from all of us. I mean, I was impressed by Commissioner Chrysler's comments right here off the top, something I hadn't thought about, but it has to be urgent. You can't have this conversation next month and the month after, and when the element, you know, the housing element finally gets approved, which I'm sure it will. You know, we really are in a position to gather information, to really do some assessment and to make some serious recommendations. And that's where I'd like to go.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. I appreciate those comments. Commissioner Felger.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to thank Permit Sonoma for that presentation and the responses to the questions. I think they did an excellent job of trying to explain and clarify the position that they have. I also would like to compliment the other commissioners for their comments and concerns, and I think that I hope that the Permit Sonoma is sensitive to what they've heard today and that they can take some of this and incorporate it into the next housing element. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Felger. Commissioner Branfett, would you like to make any comments?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Carr?
Sure, why not throw in 2 cents worth? It was interesting sitting through the SDC hearings and talking about housing affordability and how we could achieve it or not achieve it at SDC and you know, the basically huge rezoning that's going on there and still in the works, but there's going to be a pretty good percentage of affordable housing up there, and it was accomplished in 2 ways. One, of course, the zoning had to be in place, but the bottom line is that we made room for 200 units of nonprofit subsidized housing, which, by the way, is the only way that you're going to get a housing that's affordable to very low and moderate income. You are not going to do that with the market. It's just not going to happen. We did the second part that we did was to try to address the missing middle. What we had applied is an 1,800 square foot house size limitation on market rate units, and a low percentage of single family detached units to boot. And you know, to me, it's a little bit of a misnomer to say those are affordable. And that doesn't say that they're not needed. Missing middle are that group of income levels that's just above the moderate cutoff. So they're not deed restricted, but they're smaller units on smaller lots. And I like to use my example. I live in a townhome in Sonoma. My wife and I bought about 10 years ago for $400,000, and now it's worth $8 million. And that's just the message is that you can talk all you want about missing middle, but if it's not deed restricted, it will not be affordable. It may be something that a first-time home buyer can get into that he couldn't otherwise get into. But as soon as that person's lived there for a few years, the next person's not going to be able to get in there, the next firefighter and teacher. So you're kidding yourself if you think that other than a temporary fix, the missing middle is not going to be fixed by market rate prices. So, you know, the reality is what's needed is a combination of zoning and money. And it really requires a high level of subsidy to make these projects work. Projects like the Fetters, the Verano Hotel project, the Siesta Way, those projects are what's going to work and what's going to provide housing. The unfortunate thing is that the demand for those places is so much larger than the supply. And so I think that places like SDC, maybe the Springs, maybe Airport up in northern Sonoma County, those specific plan areas will be a good source for higher density housing projects that are near job areas, and you know, and it'll will really address the vehicle miles traveled issue. You know, a lot of the ADUs in rural areas in this county are a climate disaster, and it's really too bad that the state took that out of our hands. If we could have had ADUs limited to the urban areas on sewer and water, then I could have raised my hand and said, man, we did something good here. But this housing element includes a number of programs that involve additional rural development that I think is wrong. And, you know, I don't know whether the commission and board are going to go for those, but I think if we focus on the urban areas, we get, the push should be for funds to subsidize projects beyond what is currently available through the feds and the state and the local. Then I think we have a chance to do something really nice and address it. But you know, the bottom line is the housing market in the Bay Area is out of reach. And all you have to do is go down and sit in the Salesforce building and look over the Bay, the Bay Bridge, and it'll answer all your questions about whether or not it's possible to really do affordable housing at a level that will address the very valid concerns that you've all raised here. And it's you know, I'm already talking too long, but I just think it's a dose of reality, and the many tries that have gone on in the past to raise money for subsidies of affordable housing have generally failed because people are tax conscious, people are real estate industry doesn't get behind those kind of things, you know, and so, you know, it's a quandary of political and technical and financial feasibility that it faces. And the housing element's not going to solve that. The housing element is going to help. And one of the problems with the housing element and the approach that the state takes is they say, all right, you've got this number of units you've got to provide sites for, but they don't have any way that is allowable to reserve those sites for affordable housing projects. So what happens is, over time, the only affordable projects, affordable units you get out of these sites are the inclusionary zoning that's required in a market rate development. So my last number I'll throw at you, inclusionary zoning is 20% affordable. The RHNA is 58% affordable. So I can just about guarantee that unless we get a lot of money for some subsidized projects, that we're going to be sitting here in 8 years and we're going to go, whoa, we did great on market rate. Look at all the market rate units we got out of these sites. Oh, how many affordable? Well, we didn't quite do very well at the extremely low and at the low, and that's, I'd love to turn that around. I'd love to turn that around and do something really nice here, but I feel like I'm pushing a soft rope uphill when I really think about how this can unfold. So anyway, that's my speech, and I think you're right about this housing element. I think it's a pretty good one, although I do think they're rezoning too many sites. I don't think they need as many as they're asking for, but beyond that, I think it's a good effort. And by the way, Jane Riley, I'm going to raise my hand in pride and say I hired her for the county way back when, and says the best hire I ever made, and she knows her way around the housing element big time. So that when you get a chance to work, you got a chance to work with her tonight, and she's now out in the private sector doing it for everybody else, but she's really good. So if you have any questions or anything, I wouldn't hesitate to give her and Eric a call, and they'll help you out. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Carr. Well, I guess I would just summarize, if I can, ineloquently, but just say that Celeste's comments had me kind of ready to hit the embattlements and fight. And I think I heard a lot of hope in Commissioner Ituri's comments. I just think that, this is a battle worth fighting. And I think it's one that we really have to have a strong response to this, whether it was pulled together because of this process that the state makes us go through or not. I'm moved by the energy that I feel surrounding this by all of you. And I feel like we really have to, granted, it's not going to affect us tomorrow, but it's going to affect us in a couple years. And it is affecting us right now based on things that we didn't do before. And I don't want to live in that world where it's just one type of person around me. I want the diversity, and diversity always means strength to me. And so we really have to support that. And this is where it starts at the grassroots level. So my hope is that with this, there is either, I think of the collaborative as one avenue for the energy that's going into talking about this in our valley. I don't know whether there's room for another group to be formed to take on this challenge, but I think this has kind of put me in the mindset that I want to personally get involved outside of this commission and do some things. So I really appreciate all that you guys have done. I really appreciate what PRMD has done. Maybe it's the holidays and it makes me a little melancholy, but I just really appreciate all of you and what you guys do for our community. So that said, there's one last thing I have to ask, and that's there is one last item on our agenda, which is to call for an adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn from some of my fellow SVCAC members?
Motion to adjourn this wonderful meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Dombach. Do I have a second?
Motion to second.
Commissioner Chrysler, thank you. All those in favor say aye, thumbs up. Aye. Well, that looks like it's a wrap. Appreciate everybody's efforts, as I say. have a happy holiday. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Juan and Lynn Marie, as always.
Yes, thank you very much,
Great.
Juan. I think of how I lose my voice over just a few words.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you all.
Good night, everyone.